Who's on the presidential primary ballot in Oregon? Politics. Oregon will have 14 candidates for president in the May 19 primary. There will be 3 Republican candidates on the Oregon presidential primary ballot, plus 11 Democrats seeking the nomination. The Oregon Secretary of State's office released the names of those 14 choices for the statewide May 19 primary. In alphabetical order, they are: Republicans, Donald Trump, Joe Walsh, Bill Weld. Democrats, Michael Bennet, Joe Biden, Michael Bloomberg, Pete Buttigieg, Tulsi Gabbard, Amy Klobuchar, Deval Patrick, Bernie Sanders, Tom Steyer, Elizabeth Warren, Andrew Yang. Democratic presidential candidate Senator Bernie Sanders, IVT. Center, speaks as fellow candidates businessman Tom Steyer. From left, Senator Elizabeth Warren, D. Massachusetts, former Vice President Joe Biden, former South Bend Mayor Pete Buttigieg and Senator Amy Klobuchar, D. Minnesota. Listen, Tuesday, January 14, 2020, during a Democratic presidential primary debate hosted by CNN and the Des Moines Register in Des Moines, Iowa. On the GOP side, Joe Walsh is a former Illinois congressman who gave up his syndicated radio talk show to enter the fray against Trump. Bill Weld was a Massachusetts governor who ran for vice president as a Libertarian in 2016. Democrats begin voting in earnest Monday with the Iowa caucuses. The New Hampshire primary is a week from Tuesday. That means it's possible some of the 11 Democrats on the Oregon ballot may have dropped out of the race by the time of this primary. That's already the case in Washington, which holds their primary on March 10, just 1 week after Super Tuesday. In Washington, Cory Booker and John Delaney will appear on the ballot, but they recently dropped out. Lines: some delays signal strong turnout at Iowa caucuses. Lines of people snaked out the door and down the block, waiting to enter an Iowa caucus site Monday, among the early signs of strong turnout as Democrats begin choosing a nominee to take on President Donald Trump. The start of a caucus in downtown Iowa City had to be delayed by more than an hour as hundreds of people were still waiting to check in or register to vote. Inside the Englert Theater near the University of Iowa, 500 first-floor seats were mostly full, and organizers were opening an additional 200 seats in the balcony. In Polk County, Iowa's largest county and home to the capital city, Des Moines, Democratic County Party Chairman Sean Bagniewski said the party had printed tens of thousands of extra voter registration forms, but some precincts were running out. "We're making copies and deliveries to get them covered, but this caucus is gonna be the big one," Bagniewski tweeted. He also said a caucus site in central Des Moines reported 1,080 participants, more than double the 440 who turned out in that precinct in 2016. It's too soon to tell what final turnout numbers will be, though some party officials and campaigns were expecting far more people to participate than 4 years ago due to Democrats' enthusiasm to replace Trump. About 170,000 turned out in 2016. The high-water mark for the contest was the 2008 Iowa Democratic caucuses, when nearly 240,000 participated and Barack Obama defeated Hillary Clinton and Martin O'Malley. Caucusgoers reported packed rooms in other locations. More than 500 people crowded into a room at the University of Iowa Athletics Hall of Fame in Iowa City to caucus, with many sitting on the floor. Around 400 people were at a high school cafeteria in Des Moines. In Davenport, 130 gathered at a middle school gymnasium. In Iowa City, cheers erupted in the packed theater after precinct organizer Lois Cox announced that the last people in line had finally made it inside the building. "We'll start momentarily," she said. Among those attending Monday night's caucuses were some newcomers to Democratic politics. Norman and Lenora Iverson, both 86, voted Democratic for the first time. Lenora Iverson said they've voted Republican forever, but they joined with their daughter in caucusing for Minnesota Senator Amy Klobuchar, who was viable at the caucus at Hoover High School in North Des Moines. "Why did they switch parties? We don't like Trump," said Norman, a retired electrical engineer. "We don't want him to be president anymore. We've had enough of him. My party is a cult." Republican Joe Walsh on his Iowa challenge to Trump. About 50 people gathered around the room. Several had no intention of voting for the candidate. Several more were journalists from as far afield as Britain and the Czech Republic. Sandwiches and cookies were laid out on a side table. Joe Walsh has modest ambitions for the Republican caucuses in Iowa on Monday. Challenging an incumbent president from the same party is usually a thankless task. When that incumbent is Donald Trump, it is doomed not only to failure but indifference. While Democrats are locked in a titanic struggle, captivating the media, the forgotten Iowa caucuses of 2020 pitched Trump against Walsh, a former congressman from Illinois, and Bill Weld, a former governor of Massachusetts. Both seem token efforts, tennis balls bouncing off a tank. There are a lot of people who don't know a Republican caucus is happening, said Charles Seiler, communications director for Walsh, after the campaign stop at a community organization called Urban Dreams in Des Moines on Friday night. We expect the turnout to be low, but there's a real chance for us because of that. We have the advantage of low expectations. An outright victory, he admitted, would be the most insane thing ever. Seiler accused the Republican National Committee, RNC, and state parties of stitching up the nomination before the race has begun, denying access to voter data, threatening to blacklist donors and, in some states, keeping Walsh off the ballot altogether. It's basically a campaign on the outside, he said. Trump's absolute monarch status in the party was emphasized by senators' vote on Friday to block witnesses and documents at his impeachment trial, assuring him of a speedy acquittal. There is zero appetite for a challenger. If the party's objective is make sure Walsh and Weld don't get talked about, it appears to be succeeding. Walsh tweeted on Saturday that Jeff Kaufman, the Republican chairman in Iowa, is a Trump tool. Like so many of these GOP state party chairs, he kisses Donald Trump's ring on a daily basis. And like his master, Jeff Kaufman will lie all the time. The previous night at Urban Dreams, wearing blue jacket, blue shirt and blue jeans, Walsh admitted it has been a steep learning curve. I knew when I did this it was a long shot, he told The Guardian. I said at the beginning, I thought it was really important that a Republican do this. I've been discouraged because I did not see all the mean un-American things the party would do. My party is a cult. I'm a conservative Republican, Fox News won't have me on. Conservative media will ignore me because they're a cult with Trump. The Republican parties in each state. They are a cult for Trump. I didn't sufficiently get all of that, and that's made this really hard. But the 58-year-old added, every time I'm out there talking primarily to Republican voters, because that's what I'm trying to do, there are a lot of Republicans that get angry at me, and we get threats every day, and it can get ugly, but I'm always amazed at the number of Republicans who tell me, I like some of the things Trump's done, Joe, but I'm exhausted with Trump. Every day it's the Donald Trump show. So I think I have an opportunity to do better than people think, and I hope I can do that in Iowa. Voters questioned Walsh about topics including student loans, the national debt, diplomacy and his pernicious lie, since recanted, that Barack Obama is Muslim. I think we're all a little bit racist, the candidate replied, adding that the catalyst for his apology was the 2016 election. I think Trump is the worst of all of us. Having him in the White House was like a cold slap for me. I asked, oh my God, on my worst day, did I sound like Trump? Such past flaws make it even less likely that Walsh, who belonged to the Tea Party and is now a Chicago-area radio talk show host, will dent Trump's monopoly. John Olson, a voting rights activist, said afterwards, I think he's a political shock jock. That's what this was more than anything else. But I do respect how he came here and had conversations with us. He was willing to listen. Olson, 50, agreed that the uncompetitive Republican caucuses have hardly registered in the public consciousness. They might as well change it to the Trump Party instead of the Republican Party. He totally dominates. The number one reason he mustn't be re-elected is he's a bully. Andrea Black, 61, a retired physician, welcomed Walsh's efforts. I'm a Democrat, but I am so supportive of a Republican who is willing to step out of the gridlock and point out Trump is a demagogue. In 2016 I was all in for Hillary, but in 2020 I'm feeling the burn. Porachista Kakper Reed Moore Weld, 74, who ran for vice president in 2016 as a libertarian, is also campaigning in Iowa. In a Guardian interview in October, he said, my sense more broadly, being on the hustings, is everyone's exhausted by Trump, they'd rather think about healthcare and other issues that have more to do with their daily lives. Walsh and Weld are expected to fight on in the New Hampshire primary on 11 February, but South Carolina and Nevada canceled their contests in a show of allegiance to Trump. And both men's financial resources are dwarfed by the president's war chest. The Trump campaign is dispatching more than 80 surrogates to Iowa to gather recruits and donations, keep its operation match fit, and steal at least some of the Democrats' thunder. Chris Ager, one of New Hampshire's 3 representatives on the RNC, told the Associated Press. Even though it's a foregone conclusion that the president will win the Republican primary, we still want them to go out and vote. We don't want to cede the ground to the Democrats just because they have more enthusiasm. Online misinformation fuels doubt as 2020 vote kicks off well before Iowans cast the first ballots of the 2020 presidential race. An insidious campaign to seed distrust in the election process was already underway. Conservative and liberal activists took to social media to push outright false or unproven claims to their online followers. Suspicions even reached President Donald Trump, who questioned the Democratic primary's fairness to his tens of millions of Twitter followers. Misleading social media complaints, some go as far as alleging a vast conspiracy will determine the next president, were likely to intensify over the course of the presidential race. The falsehoods could so erode faith in the election that a losing candidate's supporters may refuse to accept the results, either for the nomination or the White House, warned David Becker, founder and director of the Center for Election Innovation and Research. "The thing that keeps me up at night," Becker said, "is that even if the 2020 election is fair and well managed, the losing party's supporters won't accept that democracy worked." On the eve of Monday's Iowa caucuses, conservative pundits used Twitter posts and YouTube videos to wrongly allege that the vote is ripe for fraud because there are more adults registered to vote in 8 Iowa counties than actually living there. Not true, according to the state's own publicly available voting information. Secretary of State Paul Potte debunked the claim Monday on Twitter, where the erroneous assertion had been liked and retweeted by thousands of social media users. The claim was initially planted on a YouTube video put out by the conservative group Judicial Watch. "It's unfortunate this organization continues to put out inaccurate data regarding voter registration, and it's especially disconcerting they chose the day of the Iowa caucus to do this," Potte said. His office released and tweeted data that showed the number of voters registered in those 8 counties did not actually exceed the adult population. But the claim grew online, liked, retweeted and viewed thousands of times. Some even accused Potte of lying about official voter registration numbers, showing how difficult it can be to correct online misinformation once it's shared widely. "Stop lying and fix the problem, otherwise you're the problem," one woman tweeted to Potte. Tom Fitton, who leads Judicial Watch, acknowledged in an interview with the Associated Press that he used older statistics and census numbers to argue that the number of registered voters outnumbered the entire adult population in 8 Iowa counties. Fitton maintained voter fraud as a big issue and said he released the findings in order to coincide with the Iowa caucuses. Other social media users seized on campaign developments over the weekend to suggest the presidential election process was rigged. On Saturday, the Des Moines Register and CNN announced that it would withhold the results of a final presidential poll because Democratic presidential candidate Pete Buttigieg's name was omitted from at least one interview. Social media users who identify as supporters of Senator Bernie Sanders quickly turned to Twitter where, using number released the poll, they alleged that the media outlets intentionally suppressed the results only to hide how well Sanders was doing in the state. "We know Bernie Sanders is winning Iowa, and we the people deserve to see the results of the poll," one Twitter user wrote in a tweet shared hundreds of times. The claims hark back to the 2016 election, when Sanders supporters griped that the Democratic Party had rigged the primary process in favor of Hillary Clinton. Trump, who could see Sanders as